Well, everyone, let's climb into the Wayback Machine and venture back to the far and distant times of before April 10th, 2012. Do you remember what the mainstream media was falling all over themselves to talk about? The Anti-Romney. A character created by the media, a statesman whose rise would end Romney's media-imposed stranglehold on the Republican primary. Almost every single candidate who came through the primary was declared to be the anti-Romney, only to fall as Romney came closer to his apparent destiny as GOP nominee in 2012. But then came April 10th, 2012. Rick Santorum suspended his presidential campaign, which is Politico speak for saying, "I quit." Suddenly, the media goes silent about the anti-Romney. Even though Romney isn't the only candidate left in the race, there's still an
ideologically consistent 12-term congressman who came within less than 200 votes of winning the straw poll. Isn't anyone going to give that gentleman a little love?
Yep, we're right back where we started. Ron Paul versus the system. Now, what's incredibly ironic about the media ignoring the one last anti-Romney, Ron Paul, is that Ron Paul is actually an anti-Romney. Ron Paul is the first anti-Romney to actually parallel the Bush-era neoconservative, civil liberties violating, world policing, big spending, drug warring republicanism, which Romney embodies. Rick Perry, Herman Cain, Newt Gingrich, Rick Santorum, Ron Paul. And despite what the mainstream media might be telling you, Ron Paul is actually doing better in delegate numbers than has been reported. Oftentimes, Ron Paul will swoop into a state and scoop up supermajorities of the delegates, but the mainstream media reports straw polls or caucuses from those states, in essence, biasing the coverage in favor of Mitt Romney. For example, Ron Paul won 21 of the 24 delegates of Maine, but the mainstream media made a big deal out of the fact that Romney won the caucuses in Maine, despite the fact that he only got 12.5% of the actual delegates, whereas Ron Paul won 87.5% of the delegates. That's called ponage. Do you see what's wrong here? The whole system of the mainstream media's reporting of the 2012 race is biased against Ron Paul. Even worse are those delegate numbers you always see on TV. You would expect that the media would report the actual number of delegates committed to each candidate, but no, that's not the case. So let's take a look at some real delegate numbers, shall we? The real 2012 delegate count.com, which reports the actual number of committed delegates for each candidate, reports that Mitt Romney has 351 actual delegates, Ron Paul has 137 actual delegates, and there's still 1,660 delegates still to be determined at state conventions. Not even mentioning Newt Gingrich's 24 delegates and Rick Santorum's 143 delegates. Now, while Ron Paul only has 40% of the number of delegates as Mitt Romney, the statistics used by the mainstream media would have you believe that Ron Paul only has 10% of the number of delegates as Mitt Romney. That's off by a factor of 4. When Rick Santorum was on the rise like this, the media crowned him the next anti-Romney. When Newt Gingrich, who only had 24 committed delegates, won the South Carolina primary, the media was quick to say, oh, he's the next anti-Romney. But Ron Paul, who's had a consistent rise in delegate numbers, who is actually ideologically the true anti-Romney, has been neglected, ignored, and actively opposed by the mainstream media. Now, I may sound like a whining, reactionary, Ron Paul-obsessed robot, but what does it say about our media that it would so actively try to defeat such an extraordinary politician? Would you start to wonder if maybe our free media isn't quite as free as we'd think? That the constant ideological headbutting of the liberal MSNBC and conservative Fox News is really just an opiate, convincing people that they're seeing real debate, while actual voices of dissent are limited to smaller channels such as Russia Today and Fox Business Network. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I just believe the individual interests of the journalists, media companies, corporations, and government involved in the media pushes out voices of real dissent. That maybe we ought to seek out alternative sources of news to find the truth. All I can say is, thank God for the interwebs, the one place the system hasn't gotten its hands around yet.
Tonight, Maine's Republican Party announced Mitt Romney as the winner of their caucuses.